Okay, let me start with you all. What are Boolean functions? Can someone tell me what are Boolean functions? Anyone would like to take a try?
Functions which can take in multiple Boolean inputs and give out a Boolean output. It's just a
Okay,
guess.
good. So yeah, that seems like it, that it should take some Boolean inputs and it should output something Boolean. That's in a nutshell, that is correct. So the important thing is we are going to deal with this object, right? These are all strings of length n made up of 0 and 0 and 1 are not very special here. You will see that very soon I will transfer to -1 and 1. Yeah, don't get very attached to 0 and 1, but mostly 0 comma 1 to the power n, or -1 comma 1 to the power n. This generally, one of the important thing is called Hamming weight, which is the number of ones in there. Okay, and then the way to visualize this set is that you can keep all ones at the top, all zeros at the bottom, and then you can think of all weight 1 inputs at the first layer, or the second layer from the bottom, and then in the middle layer you will have n by 2 weight inputs. Right, so you can think of it as this kind of a, what we call a Boolean hypercube. This is the main object of study, and you tell me, why do you think this object of study is important for us? Any guesses?
Sir, I do not understand the construction of that hypercube. Could you please once repeat it?
Sure. So this is, you have all strings of length n, right? What I'm doing it is I'm dividing those strings into n plus 1 levels. Depending on how many number of ones are there in that string, right? So the number of ones can be 0, the number of ones could be 1, the number of ones could be 2, and up to n. So there are n plus 1 choices. Each of them is giving rise to one level. Okay, and yeah, later you will see that we will connect to inputs if they just differ at exactly 1 place. Okay, this is called a Boolean. Sounds good. So
Yes.
two inputs are connected. Since they only differ at one place, definitely they will be in the adjacent levels. Correct? If differ at just one place. Okay, this is your Boolean hypercube. Right. So why is this object important for us? That's my first question. Why do you think? And there is more pressure on computer scientists to answer this question. I think we can let Aditya and Udit not answer that question. They are from electrical engineering, so it's fine. But there is more pressure on computer scientists to answer this question. Any guesses? Anindya, Dibarsho?
So we know the importance of Boolean values and 0,
Correct.
1, but
Why? What is the importance?
so everything in the computer is like either it's current on or off, so it's represented in the form of 0 or 1s at the
Great.
lowest level.
Great. Everything in computers is represented as a string of 0. This could be a number, this could be an image, this could be a file, this could be a text file. Everything is represented as 0, 1, right? That's why obviously these things are very, very important to computer scientists. And then we talk about functions over this too. As Aditya mentioned, it takes something Boolean as an input and it outputs something Boolean. Right? There is some discrepancy in some textbooks. Even when this range is real, some very few books will still call it a Boolean function. But for us, remember, we call this as the Boolean function and the output is 0, 1. It's not a big deal. There are no marks for knowing the exact name of things. But yeah, this Boolean functions means 0, 1 to the power n going to 0, 1. Fortunately or unfortunately, even when the range is real, those functions are very closely related to Boolean functions. And we will be studying both of them in time. Okay. So even these functions are important for us. Okay. Obviously, Boolean functions are a subset of them. And both of them we will study during the course, during this course. Right? And now, since we know that everything is represented on computer as a Boolean string, then Boolean functions are important because they will give all transformations. On the data. Whatever you are storing on the computer, whatever you are applying, whatever things, whatever operations you are going to apply, whatever transformations you are going to apply on them, they're going to become Boolean functions. Correct? And don't worry, you might say, oh, the output are going to be 2 Boolean values. Who cares? You can think of it as 2 Boolean functions.
2 Boolean functions.
Yeah, exactly. You can think of it as F1 and F2. So that's not a big deal. You don't have to worry about it. It's quite clear that most of our operations are Boolean functions. So it's important that we study them. So we have taken it on ourselves to study these functions. And if you look at it, lot of places talk about circuit theory, complexity theory, error correct coding theory or error correcting codes, cryptography. All of these fields are require the use of Boolean functions heavy, and that's why we are going to study, right? And you must have seen many many Boolean functions. Can someone tell me a Boolean function? Name of a Boolean function? Except Udit, I know Udit knows a lot of Boolean functions. So anyone else?
Bernoulli trial.
Sorry.
Bernoulli trial. Maybe.
Let's not put probabilities at this point. That will make things complicated, but more simpler. Probably the question is much simpler than you think. Very simple Boolean functions, which you might have studied in the first course on computer science, logic or something. How many of you know AND function? Right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Right?
sir. And,
Or function, AND function. You have seen these, right? All the circuits in computer science are made up of AND and OR, right? So these are all Boolean functions, right? So, and we are going to look at all these functions in detail. Probably as हिंदी में बोलते कि उनका वो चीथड़ा एक एक कर देंगे, सब पूरा का पूरा एनालिसिस कर डालेंगे. That's the objective of this course, right? And I've been saying objective. Let's talk about this objective. First would be, what are the tools to study Boolean functions? We have to study Boolean functions, but how? And the answer is going to be Fourier analysis. That's going to be one of the main tools. How many people know what Fourier analysis is? Can I just see a show of hand? Raise your
I had read it in my signals and systems class.
Okay, good. Can people raise their hand if they know about Fourier analysis? Just one. Aditya is two. Bhanu, Debarsho, anyone? Okay. Okay. So good thing is that you don't have to worry about it, because the kind of Fourier analysis people see in signal processing is slightly different. The domain there is real numbers or complex. There is some similarity when we come to Boolean hypercube, how we define Fourier analysis, but then it is completely different. Okay, so the motivation will come similarly from how Fourier analysis is done on real numbers, and I will kind of talk about it. It's not kind of that important, but after that, it's an entire field in itself. It's called Fourier analysis over Boolean hypercube. This way we will find out many properties of Boolean functions and see how to measure their complexity, how to evaluate them, and things like that. Another thing, another objective of this course is to convince you that Boolean functions are special. It is and to give you an intuition at the first line, notice that we are saying that the output is very constrained. It has only two values, no other real value. It is either 0 or 1. If you are in the -1, 1 domain, and it is only -1 and 1. And you might say, oh, why this is surprising? Let me tell you, you will be convinced about it once you finish this course. You will see many special properties of these things, because these are Boolean functions. And our task is to discover these special properties. Time and again in the course, I will say, oh, look at this thing. This result will only hold for Boolean functions. As soon as you generalize your definition of functions, this result does not hold. And then because it only holds for Boolean functions, there is going to be an application. This is the kind of thing which we will see a lot in this course. Another thing, how to measure complexity of Boolean. I do research in complexity theory. This is the thing which we study. We want to say how hard a problem is to solve on a computer, or how difficult it is to make an algorithm for a problem, right? This is complexity theory, and this is what we are going to learn here, how to define complexity. There is no single definition of complexity. We will talk about complexity in computational model. Given that I am a nice guy, I'm not going to introduce many complicated definitions, but mostly stick with the simplest model of complexity measure, which we call decision tree complexity. Generally, what we will do is we will take simple objects, but then go in technical detail to figure out every strand of that idea or a concept. Then we can have even mathematical definitions of complexity. We can have algebraic, combinatorial, many different kind of definitions of what does it mean that a function is hard, it is complex, it is difficult. And finally, we would want to relate these complexity relations. What do I mean by this? Some of you are electrical engineering students, some of you are mathematicians, some of you are computer scientists. For everyone, there is a different complexity measure which says, oh, this function is difficult. Now, intuitively, there should be some relation, right? If a function is complex, for a mathematician, it should be complex, not always, but there should be some relation. That function should be complex for a computer scientist. And this is going to be our task, to find out relations. When can we say that if a function is complex in a mathematical sense, then it is complex in computer science? So all these kind of different questions, this is going to be the content of this course. Boolean, what are Boolean functions? That's easy. How do you analyze Boolean functions? What are their special properties? How do you apply them? And then how do you figure out the complexity of these functions? This is going to be the main object of this course. And to kind of emphasize my point, let me show you a very simple application of Boolean strings. Again, Arindeo might laugh at it because he must have seen it in his first course of cryptography. It's a very simple application, but again, you will see that just because we are dealing with Boolean functions, it gives a very nice way to encode our input or our message. Okay. So, and as always, when we go to an application, I have to give you some background of what we are talking about. The application is in the area of cryptography. And in this area, generally, encryption is considered to be of two kinds. Symmetric key encryption and asymmetric key encryption. Anyone wants to take a guess of what symmetric key encryption is? Okay, what is the main goal of cryptography? I would say, okay, Anindyo might differ on that, but simple first goal of cryptography is that you have two parties, famously known as Alice and Bob, and then there is a message which needs to be transferred from Alice to Bob. The problem is the world is not so nice. There are intruders. There are eavesdroppers, and we generally call it Eve. So Alice, let's say she's very happy. Bob doesn't have the message yet, sad. And then we want to transfer a message, but unfortunately Eve is, I don't know how to draw a scary face, but Eve is sitting on the top and trying to catch this message so that she also knows the message. The task for the Alice is to transfer the message so that Bob understands this message, Eve has no clue, right? This is one of the very basic primitive tasks of cryptography, right? This is called encryption and decryption. Again, probably I'm reiterating what all of you already know. So let's see, let's talk about the next concept, which is two kinds of encryption, symmetric and asymmetric. So one of you would like to take a guess, what is symmetric key encryption?
When both keys are same for encryption and decryption, that is symmetric key. And but for encryption and decryption, we have different key. Then it is asymmetric key. That is public key cryptography, I think.
Oh, very good. Very good. Who was that?
Bhanu Dubey.
Oh, Bhanu. Thank you, Bhanu. Perfect, Bhanu. So this is completely correct. When your encryption and decryption key are the same, then we call it a symmetric key cryptography. in the sense that both Alice and Bob are going to use the same key. You might have heard of public key cryptography, where encryption and decryption keys are different. Except Bhanu, can someone tell me an example of a symmetric key encryption? The most famous example probably. If you know one encryption protocol, I would assume that that would be this asymmetric key encryption.
RSA.
RS, right. Correct. This is this famous protocol in 1975 or something, where magically, even though one person's key is different from other, and still somehow you can encode. And I think all the computer science people definitely know about it. Others, if you don't, please go and read about it. It's one of the very nice mathematical results on number theory. It's beautiful. So definitely read it. It's not required for this course, but it's a definite read. RSA crypto system, right? And now, as the story goes, it was easier to find symmetric key encryptions. The one which we are going to study, which is very simple, is called one-time pad. But unfortunately, for this symmetric key encryption to work, Alice and Bob have to meet and share a secret. Okay, that means this key is not available for Eve, right? And now, if you are looking at it closely, you might ask, then what is the use? When Alice and Bob meet, when they share a secret key, they can as well share the message, right? So why is that not a problem? Why is that not a counter? Still, symmetric key encryption is helpful.
Because I mean, for multiple times, if they want to share the message.
That is not, no. If you are sending multiple messages, generally you don't want to use the same secret key, especially in one-time pad.
Yeah, I mean, also because this, I mean, say supposing even if they are meeting for one time, the key might be small. I mean, the size of the key might be small, and the message.
That might be true, but that's not the reason.
Maybe they want to send the message sometime later, so they can use it
Exactly.
once.
Exactly. The point is, when they share the secret key, that time, message is not even present. Alice doesn't even know what the message is going to be. So they are in Kanpur, they are talking to each other, they share a secret key saying that when you're during COVID, if we have to go back home and then we have to share some secret message, let's say, what did my family cook today in dinner, and I want to secretly transmit it to you, then I will use this. Right? So the point is that you, at this point, you don't know what your family is going to cook after 3 months. The message is not there, but you can share the secret. It is independent of the message. And then when you get the message, after receiving the message, you encode it using this secret. Right? That's why it is not cheating. It's not like, oh, you should have just shared the message when you met, right? So what is the important thing? The important thing is the secret key is independent of the message. Okay, so this is clear. This point is clear. Okay, great. Now, so let's look at the protocol. Let's look at how Boolean functions are going to be helpful. We can, without loss of generality, assume that our message is a string in 0, 1 to the power n. We are going to send it by computer. Computer encodes everything as 0, 1 strings. So even my message is going to be some string in 0, 1. When we send it, we want to make sure that Eve has no idea about it. Right? This is the goal. And now the idea of one-time pad is to use a function called XOR. How many people know what XOR function is? Again, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, okay, okay. Almost everyone. Good. It's a simple function. Just for one or two people who don't know, if you have 2 bits, then x XOR y is 0 if, when is it 0? Go ahead, you can speak.
When X and Y
Both are same.
When both are same. Both are same. And one otherwise. So that means 0 XOR 1 is 1. 1 XOR 1 is 0. And now knowing this, you can actually generalize XOR to even n bit strings. If x is a string in 0, 1 to the power n, y is a string in 0, 1 to the n, you can just take XOR by taking it a bitwise. Right? So at every place we take an XOR. Again, this might be too simple for you, but I just want to make sure. Okay, go ahead, tell me what is the XOR? Okay, should I pick a random person? Okay, Anindyo, do you want to tell me what is the XOR of these two strings?
The first is 1 0 0 1 1 1 0.
Perfect. Right? Very easily you can just calculate the XOR bitwise, and this is going to be the XOR. Right? So one-time pad is very simple. You take the message, there is some R which is your secret key, which is again is of the same length as M. And then the message which you are going to transmit is going to be M plus R. Okay. R is the secret key, M is the message, C is what you transmit. Now, what do we want to show? Can you mathematically frame the question? Can anyone, or intuitively, what do we want to show now? If this is the message, okay, first thing is, how will you decrypt? So someone wants to tell me, how will you decrypt this message?
Just a reverse.
XOR it with R again.
Great. Then my message is C plus R. Again, a very nice property of Boolean functions. This kind of cancels out, right? And then you get the message. So decryption is very, very easy. You can, if you have seen XOR for the first time, you can convince yourself that R plus R will become all 0 strings, right? So encryption and decryption is easy, and you can kind of guess also intuitively. It feels that this should be secure. But let's now try to see mathematically why that is the case. So Can you formulate the problem? What do we want to show? First in English, then in Latin. First in English. What is, if this is the encryption decryption protocol, when will we say that it is a success?
When it is possible to determine the original message M from the transmitted message P and the secret key R, then we
That's,
say that the message can be decrypted.
that is required, but that is going to be a very, very bad thing for the security. No? So, I mean, you want Bob to recover, that we have already shown using the decryption protocol. But
So
Mhm.
I guess like just by seeing the ciphertext or just by seeing C, there shouldn't, and without knowing R,
Hmm.
we shouldn't be able to make any claim as to what M is.
Very good, very good. So the task is to say that knowing C does not give us any information about M. Obviously, we have to assume that R is not available. Because if R is available, then you know everything. Right? This is the English problem which you want to, or English proof you want to give. Knowing C does not give us any information about it, right? Okay. Now, in this case, how would you do this? Let's simplify this. Let's take it bit by bit. Okay, everything, all operations are happening bitwise. So then let's talk about this. Knowing CI, where, I have kind of made a jump. CI is the ith bit of your code word C, and MI is the ith bit of your code word M. Right? This is, I think, kind of obvious. So if you don't know anything, with what probability can you predict MI? If you have you don't know C, you don't know R, you don't know anything.
Half.
Half, right? That's simple, right? Because anyway, you can guess 0 or 1 and you will be correct half the time. Now, suppose Ci is equal to 1. Now, what is the probability that Mi is equal to 1 given Ci is equal to 1?
Half.
Right?
Huh.
Right? So, yeah, this might seem very, very trivial at this point, and you might be laughing at why we are proving it like this. But yeah, this is just the first lecture, right? I just wanted to sell this course and didn't want to tell you what complicated things we are going to do in future. But things are going to become more interesting, right? This is just the first thing, but this is small thing tells you how Boolean functions are nice. They give a very, very simple one-time pad, not a Boolean function, just Boolean strings, give you a protocol to have encryption and decryption, right? So yes, this is very, very simple application. We showed that if we wanted to transfer a message from Alice to Bob, one way to do it is they share a secret key sometime back, long time back, and when Alice gets the message, she XORs her message with the random key, sends it to Bob. Bob decrypts it by again XORing it with his received message, right? So this goes from Alice to Bob, and then Bob does it as his end, right? And then we also saw that if C is accessible to Eve, she cannot do anything to get M from it, right? Important thing here now, there are a few things which are slightly important. One thing is that we did not use any computational hardness assumption. This is one way to encrypt. This is great, but the problem again is this secret key sharing. You might not always have the possibility of sharing this secret. And then if you use the same secret key to encrypt different messages, then that's not a great thing, right? Can you kind of think of some things which might happen if you use very simple things which might happen if you use the same secret key multiple
Yeah.
times?
Yeah, so if an Oracle, I have Oracle access, and I will query two messages M0 and M1. I
Mhm.
get back the ciphertext. I will XOR M0 M1, and it is exactly same the XOR of ciphertext. So ultimately, the effect of key will vanish
Correct.
due to XOR.
Very good. Or even if you don't have a query access, in the sense that you need not query whatever you want, whatever message you want to send. Even if someone is sending it, after sending two messages, you might not get the individual messages, but you will get the XOR of them. That is some information, right? So if Eve gets these two things, they will just XOR it, and they will get M0 XOR it. Right? And that is still some information. The same idea which Anindya was saying, that if you have the query access, you can separate out your message into two parts and then get the respective code words and then XOR, right? Anindya? Right? So this is, so you don't want to use the same secret. And then if you don't know in the beginning how many messages you want to send, and then keeping random keys, so many random secret keys is a problem. And that's why asymmetric key encryption was a big discovery, where you don't have to share a secret key in the beginning and still you can transmit it. But one of the problem was the assumption in asymmetric key cryptography, which was they assumed that some problem is hard to solve. And that's why Eve cannot lay hand on the message. That's why Eve can't decrypt. Right? And now this was fine for a few years, but now there is a small problem. Can anyone guess what is the problem?
Quantum computers have come.
Yeah, yes. Was this Udit or Aditya? Who said this?
Watson.
Vatsal. Okay. Yeah. Now we have quantum computers, and they can solve many of these computational hardness assumptions. Right? And since they can solve it, then it seems that these cryptography measures will become inadequate. And another thing which many people don't know is that quantum computers allow you to share secret key even without me. This is called a BB84 protocol. Okay, so again, I think in some sense, symmetric key encryption is also in market. There are variations in even asymmetric key encryption. Again, I'm not an expert in cryptography, but there is lattice-based cryptography. People call it post-quantum cryptography. There are many ways in which people are trying to tackle this problem. But my point is that still symmetric key encryption has some advantage in some sense. And this simple protocol allows you to do encryption without having any computational hardness. This was one example. This was a very, very simple example. We will see many more problems in diverse areas which can be solved using Boolean functions. And again, the reason is that many of these structures which are used can actually be captured as a Boolean function, right? When we talk about circuits, the input is a Boolean string, the output is a Boolean output. So it is, a circuit is in itself a Boolean function. Logic, many of you have heard about AND or NOT gates and logic and everything. I don't have to say. Graph theory. Boolean functions come out to be of big use in graph theory. Can anyone guess why? How do you represent basic things in graph theory using Boolean functions?
Maybe the adjacency matrix.
Yes, yes, you can just, you have this nChoose2 length string, which captures what edges are present and what edges are not present. It could be thought of as a Boolean string. So a graph, once you know the vertices, can be thought of as a n/2 length string. And given this n/2 length string, you can ask, when is it connected? Every n/2 length string corresponds to a graph. And now you can ask, is the graph connected? Does the graph has a spanning tree? All the problems which you have heard of graph theory, now they can be thought of as some problems which you want to, all graph properties are actually Boolean functions. And that's why Boolean functions become important even in graph. Cryptography, I have given an application in the second week. You will see an application in error correcting codes and things like that. So yeah, that is how this course is going to happen. We are going to discover some properties. We're going to analyze Boolean functions, and this will give rise to some applications in different areas. And obviously the connection also goes in the other way, because applications use these Boolean functions intrinsically. They tell us what properties to discover of Boolean functions, or what structures we should find in Boolean functions. And this thing we will see in action in this course. Different applications, different properties of Boolean functions. To tell you the truth, I'm just excited about Boolean functions. That's why I study Boolean functions. But you know, initially, if you want to get interested, I will talk about applications. But just the properties and etc. are beautiful. You can decide. If you just like mathematics for the sake of it, definitely there are a lot of things there. And then if that is not enough for you, then I'm going to tell you a lot of applications. So you can decide what works for you. That is going to be the main point of this. This is going to be it for my side for the first lecture. As I said, it's going to be a small lecture. The first lecture, the first actual lecture tomorrow, will introduce Boolean functions. Okay, that's going to be the one. Remember, the Tuesday lecture is going to be at 2 p.m. Monday lecture is at 3. And I will try my best to start the lecture on time. Okay. I will stop here. Are there any questions? I would be happy to answer.
So for the asymmetric encryption, you said something about computational hardness. So is it advantageous or disadvantageous?
It is a disadvantage, right? Because you need those assumptions to make sure that these cryptographic protocols work. And you can see it as a disadvantage because people thought in 1975 that factoring seems to be hard. Let's make a crypto system out. And then suddenly now there is some machine which might solve it, right? And then if Eve has access to that machine, then you are doomed. Or let's say tomorrow someone comes up with a classical algorithm for factoring, which is not ruled out. If that happens, then all your crypto systems will go in. Right? That's why it's obviously a bad thing. It's, I'm not saying it's a very bad thing, but yeah, if everything else is the same, then we would prefer not to have computational assumptions.
Yes. Okay.
Any other questions?
Sir, you said that if we use public key cryptography, there are some possibility if we use quantum computer, means after some time someone can get information or means message can be access to use. So can you tell me how this is there is any specific things in quantum computer which facilitate this thing which cannot be done by the normal computer system? Means
Yes. To shortly answer your question, there are properties of a quantum computer. There are things in quantum physics which are not possible on a classical computer, like superposition and entanglement. Specifically, it is the superposition which you use to